All right, so I will call the Capital Planning Committee to order Thursday, October 22nd, 6:02 p.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Capital Planning Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation, but members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. All right. Welcome, Andrew. So I think we are all present, and I will go right in to the first agenda item, which is meeting minutes. I'm going to start with October 5th. These were circulated by Andrew at some point today. Have members have a chance to read them? And are you ready to vote on them? I can see head nods. So are there any comments on what Andrew drafted?
I just have a typo on Brian's name, how it's spelled on one page.
Sure. Where is it?
On the second page, the large paragraph, the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth to last line.
Okay.
That's all I've had. All right, it's in a couple spots. And also on the paragraph below.
So edit all the Valentines.
Anything else? I will move that we approve those with that one suggested edit. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Braccio?
Abstain.
Cook?
Aye.
Hark?
Aye.
Palmer?
Aye.
Pfaff?
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. 501. Next item, despite my typo on the agenda, is really the October 13th meeting minutes. We're not going to be good enough to have our meeting minutes done tonight for October 22nd. These were circulated by Jeff. Were truly a novel, but that was a long meeting. So people had a chance to read that one. Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions? All right. Seeing none, I will move that we accept the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further conversation? All right. Roll call. Braccio?
Aye.
Cook?
Aye.
Hark?
Aye.
Palmer?
Aye.
Pfaff?
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you both. Those are two long, detailed meetings, so happy to have those ones behind us. Review and approval of FY22 capital plan presentation for BOS meeting. So I did circulate a copy of this. I have absolutely no pride in authorship and welcome any and all edits. I did want to update you on two items because we did have two open items from the last meeting that we didn't actually take a vote on. The first was the sidewalk maintenance, and I candidly do not follow up that quickly with Karen and haven't gotten any additional details, so I don't want it to look like Karen wasn't responsive. I just honestly didn't reach out to her soon enough. So, you know, I'm open to feedback from the committee of where you want to go with that one. We haven't officially voted on it. I do have it in the presentation before we go through the finer details. My general thought was that we should move forward with the 200. We should continue to ask the right questions of how it would be spent and reserve our right to come back to increase it if we find that there's greater needs than what that 200 will cover. I didn't hear, and maybe I wasn't following properly, but I didn't hear anyone saying they thought a lower amount was present. It was more understanding of how it would be spent and how far it would go. Did I understand that correctly for those that weren't ready to vote last time?
Yeah, and Jason, that was mostly me, I think. But since I'm liaison to DPW, I'm sure I'll get whatever questions I have answered at that point.
Okay.
And
So
I just got a problem with the whole thing, so I'm probably going to, I'm okay with voting for it, knowing that we can always change it down the road. I just have a problem with the whole concept of it. So it's not the amount, it's the whole concept. So that's why I'm not saying a whole lot right now. I'm just not convinced that we're doing the right thing here.
So I guess what do you think we should be doing? Just so
I think that, the focus of this committee is, for lack of a more eloquent description, on new stuff. I think that the maintenance of existing sidewalks doesn't belong in this committee. And it sounds like I'm the minority, and I'm fine with that. I don't think road maintenance belongs here either, too. It's just, I think that part belongs elsewhere, too. So I put them in the same category. We've never really had a amount set aside for quote unquote sidewalk maintenance. What we've done has been part of the DPW budget. So I'm still just struggling with the whole thing. So maybe I'll just, I don't want to vote against the whole thing because it's one thing. I'm just saying I still got an issue with this one.
Yeah, Kathy, I agree. I don't think it's a capital item. We talked about, I think it could almost be a specific stabilization fund, but that's a whole different conversation that's outside of capital.
and I think if you follow, we did vote on road maintenance and we did vote on facilities maintenance and had a similar discussion last time. I think for purposes of tonight, the main reason to just move it forward, and obviously if you abstain or vote against it, that's fine. And I think that it's well documented why you're objecting to it. The main reason to move it forward is so that it doesn't get lost in the budgetary cycle. And I think we can work through the mechanics of how this should work in future years with Brian and Mark in terms of should it be in the capital purview or should it just be something that's carried in operational article that has the ability to carry over year to year, or should it carry over year to year? I think was also the question I heard on some of the items last week. But I guess my fear with just removing it from our presentation is it could get lost. Now, there's 6 of us that can remind Mark and Brian, and they do a pretty good job of tracking these things. But that was my main reason for keeping it here. But I think I also do have a bullet point somewhere in here that says that item is up for discussion for how it should be carried moving forward.
So I'm perfectly fine with that, Jason, as far as going forward. And let me just, I know we've got to move pretty fast tonight. Let me just make one more point. The only reason that the DPW road maintenance fund is a warrant article, that is, it does carry over, it does not get closed out from year to year, is because of the way Karen basically contracts with the asphalt companies to pave roads. She usually does it on a 2 or sometimes even a 3-year basis. So she needs to have a pot of money sitting there that doesn't close out so she can sign those contracts. You don't have the same thing with sidewalk maintenance. So I hate to see things sitting in warrant articles, because what happens down the road is somebody needs some money. They go look at things like they find money that are sitting in places that it wasn't intended to, and pull it over for something else if it's close enough. So I don't like the idea of money sitting in warrant articles from year to year unless there's a really good reason to it. And I don't think sidewalk maintenance should be a warrant article, just to be clear. The facility is $100,000. I could say the same thing, except that I know it's going to get used for the most part. That's why I don't worry too much about that one. And so I put that in the same category, Jason, facilities maintenance.
Okay.
So all 3, I think, are not necessarily specifically our purview, but somebody does need to look at them. That's true. So we've looked at them. So that's a good part. So I will, whatever we want to do, I will go along with, and then we will come back.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to drive forward to the policy, but this goes to policy, right? This is why I think we should have a good conversation about policy. I did have an offline conversation with Mark and Brian because they asked me a question this week, and it led to a conversation on policy. And I think what we'll be able to bring forward, I think, aligns to exactly what you're saying, Kathy, because we'll be able to put an approval process to actually have it carry over. It's not going to, it automatically will carry over by town meeting authorization, but there would be a secondary step in there that we would now go back and look at each year and saying, all right, we allocated money for a police cruiser, for example. You know, Chief Paulus, you didn't spend 5,000 of it. That 5,000 now is going back, sort of thing. It's not carrying over for the next one.
Okay, but now cruisers, just not to be picky here, they aren't in a warrant article. They're in just what we call the budget capitals. They get closed out anyway. So if you don't spend it, he would have his closed out.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that in policy. So I guess what I will do, hearing this discussion in the interest of making sure we keep this item on people's agenda, is that the committee, I'll move that the committee vote to support 200K in road maintenance and continue further investigation of whether this should fall under our purview in future years in the ability for it to roll over. There a second?
You said roads instead of sidewalk.
I'll amend my motion to say sidewalk, not roads.
Second that.
Is there any further conversation? Seeing none, do roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. The other item that I had a follow-up on, which I do have an update on, is schools. So originally I had said they're meeting the next night. We don't want to vote on anything. The superintendent did recommend that they not move forward with any of the capital articles that are on the list for NERI this year. However, he wanted to convene a meeting of their capital subcommittee. So it has nothing to do with the subcommittee Kathy and I are on. The schools actually has their own capital subcommittee that looks at these things every year. And the goal of that meeting, which I believe is scheduled for next week, would be to come back with the refined capital plan, subject to the findings of the exercise that Kathy and I are working through with Katura Martin. So we are going to make no recommendations on school. Like, we're not going to support anything. We're also not going to not support anything for schools. And we're going to message to the BOS on Tuesday night that that item remains open, subject to further conversations with the school and obviously the outcome of the school research subcommittee. Does anyone have any objections to that?
No, but it does bring up an interesting question that probably I should have asked a long time ago. You know, the schools do their own budget, right? Since, I don't know, probably 8-9 years ago, whenever Rosemary Joseph was superintendent, the schools decided to bring their capital within their budget, at least the small stuff, the computers, et cetera. The town used to have that as part of their capital. Then they decided they wanted it part of their budget. So they've taken that under their wing since then. We haven't had much to do with it. We just approved their overall budget. So now that I didn't realize they had their own capital subcommittee. So how are we going to meld the two together? Are they going to also have a 10-year capital plan that we then put together so we can look at the whole thing, given that what they're going to propose is going to be part of the town capital once they're ready to propose it? How is that going to get done?
So they have a 7-year capital plan is what they maintain. So I think that's something we need to discuss with them. But candidly, I don't think it's worth a discussion until we figure out what's happening longer term with these schools.
Okay, all right, good enough.
But yeah, no, obviously we've seen a renewed level of collaboration, and I think there is room for further collaboration there and not duplicative effort.
And of course, their plan will depend in significant part on what we decide to do with schools too. So it's all kind of interwoven.
Exactly. So I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't expect them to come back with anything until we get to December. And I think that's a prudent move as a taxpayer to just wait till we at least see where we're going with the enrollment, et cetera.
Yeah, Jason, my only thought is, even if they come back in December, would we be in favor of having it for this town meeting, or would we be asking them to push it off? Or
I think we need to understand what it is.
no, but what's on the, you know, Neary, that stuff they have on there.
It's Neary roof and Neary parking lot.
Yeah.
I think they would have to make a presentation to us. But I think as part of that, you'd have to understand what the future is of Neary in general and how the building's going to be used to actually make an educated decision on that.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I don't know if we'll be ready. We would be ready to have that. So do we just say, as of right now, I don't support it because we don't have that information?
My vote would be to do nothing, but I certainly could be, or I don't want to preemptively close the door on something if there's a good reason to do something. Like there may be an engineering analysis that needs to be done to support the work that's being done as part of school research. I don't know what building that would be on, et cetera, but I guess I never like to close the door before I've heard. But that's just my 2 cents. I welcome feedback from others.
That's fine. Yeah, just leave the door open for the next couple of months in case something pops up.
Yeah, and we'll stress the need to understand where they're headed in their heads to make sure it lines up with, obviously, the updates Kathy and I are bringing back to everyone here. All right. So in terms of content of the presentation, the only other edit that I would propose we make is on page 16, before I open it up and go around the horn on edits, is we have asking them to vote on a draft capital planning policy. As I thought about that one some more, I don't think we're not gonna be able to do justice to a policy tonight, which is why I didn't share a draft. And therefore, we're gonna discuss the concept of a capital planning policy with them, see if any of them have any feedback on what should go into one. And then we'll just tell them it'll be on a future agenda that we can submit it, whether it be part of consent or discussion. I'll leave that up to the chair of BOS. So I would just say discussion of draft capital planning policy of the concept, not a vote on page 16. So I think the easiest way to do this is maybe to go alphabetically with any proposed edits that anyone else, I have it live on my screen. I'm happy to bring it up if we think that's needed, or I'm happy to just make them as people propose them, assuming everyone's in agreement with them. All right, Lisa, I'll start with you.
I had one question, Jason. It was answered earlier, so I'm good.
Okay. Kathy?
I'm good.
Jeff?
The only question I had, this goes back to last meeting, one of the points Andrew brought up about fire chief vehicle and whether we want to put something in here about surplusing that if we can't find a use for it.
Okay. How does the committee feel about that?
Surplusing a vehicle if we can't find a use for it.
A vehicle, yes. You want to be net zero.
Yeah.
Okay. So how about I propose we put that on slide 15 for items in the works, and then discussion and recommendation related to retired fire vehicle. Because right then that cover will affect either you retire, I think someone threw out the facilities director's car in the last meeting. Is that the right answer? But I think leaves it broad enough that there may be 3 vehicles that are in play here, but it starts with, once the chief's vehicle gets approved, what do we then do with that vehicle and how does that ripple down through the system? Does that work?
That works.
And I'll just say with an intent of being net zero, not adding a vehicle to the fleet. So that was Jeff. Joe?
No, I'm fine.
Andrew?
I think it's good. The only thing I was looking at is some of the like bonded, not bonded. I don't know if we haven't really discussed that. I mean, there's proposed bonded or not bonded, but we haven't really discussed whether or not any of this should be bonded.
I don't think you've got to do that for this meeting. You're just trying to get the approval of what we're going to do, and we've got time to figure out. I don't think you should do that till we really know what the whole picture looks like. Then you can decide, how you want to pay for it, if it needs to be stretched out or not.
That's why I was just kind of saying maybe take it off.
Well, the only reason I have it in there, in Brian and Mark, you should absolutely weigh in here, is it goes to what we're telling the BOS that the general fund expenditures would be next year. So for example, if Brian decides to bond something that we have coming out of the general fund, that lowers your general fund expenditures for next year. However, if Brian changes his mind, which there's nothing currently proposed as bonded for the general fund items. But if Brian, if we did have a situation like that, and Brian said, I'm not going to bond this even though your budgeted was, that's going to increase our general fund expenditure. So that was the intent of having it in there. I'm not wed to keep it in there, but it does go into the assumptions of the numbers that we lead with.
That's
Brian?
fine. You just have to say that this can be changed when we get the whole budget put together and see what it looks like. So it's fine. It's fine. This would be the worst case scenario, right? As far as how it would affect fiscal year 22. So I take it back. I think it's fine. And just know that that's something that's still that could be changed in part, all in part, depending on how things turn out with everything else.
That makes sense.
I'm just going to bring it up here for a second, just to make sure we're all on the same page. This is what I'm going to write. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
So I'm just going to write items subject to bonding open for further deliberation / further analysis. Everyone okay with that?
I was just thinking like the hook lift truck or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be one of the bigger things.
Yes. And then I'm going to go back down here and say discussion of repurposing fire vehicle and its future use to achieve net zero increase to town vehicle fleet. Everyone good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other edits or items you want to discuss? Okay. So I will entertain a motion on this presentation.
Second.
Well, I didn't move it because I wrote it, so I think someone else should move it.
So moved.
What are you moving?
What are you moving?
Not to be,
I
yeah,
don't know.
not to be picky on, but
Okay. So, I make a motion that we accept the presentation as amended tonight for consideration and presentation to the Board of Selectmen on 10/27.
yeah. So I just noticed it. No one called me out that I don't have the right date on the front page. I'm changing that too. Is there a second to Lisa's motion?
Second it.
Any further conversation? All right, roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Aye.
Palmer, Pfaff. I didn't hear you, Andrew. I saw your mouth move.
Aye.
And then Malinowski is aye. So that passes unanimously. Logistics for Tuesday night, given that we are the guests of the BOS, you won't get a dedicated link. If you log into the town website under virtual meetings, they'll be able to pull us in and we'll be able to call ourselves to order whenever we're up on the agenda. So it's a little different than normal, but and then we are not going to conduct any other business. We won't even approve meeting minutes from tonight, et cetera. We'll just be in, out, and adjourn as soon as they release us and move on to the next item.
So will minutes need to be kept on our end?
Yes,
Jason, if I could just add one thing.
good.
I just want to thank you for taking the time and the effort you put into doing this presentation. It's awesome. So thank you.
And thank you for that. And I guess what I would say is, I don't, just watching how Marty ran a joint meeting with Personnel Board and a few other boards last time, just because I'm making the presentation, if there's something I miss or other items you want to add color commentary to, make sure that the chair sees that you want to chime in there, because you will be on the screen just like we are right now. So just because I'm making the presentation doesn't mean others can't chime in or present a slightly different variation of what I present. Any questions on that? All right, so the next was capital planning policy. I already slightly touched on this, but Andrew actually had done some research and looked at a few other towns. I actually liaised with the chair of the Nantucket Capital Planning Committee and got a copy of their plan. And it's amazing how when you start looking at different towns' plans, some of them have the same exact language, and some of them take many different detours along the way. I understand from the Nantucket one in particular, they actually got a grant to write theirs, and it's a much broader financial document. But Brian and Mark, you should probably take a look at that more broadly from a town perspective. But there was 90, I don't remember how many pages there was, but a lot of pages. So what I thought I would do for the committee was two things. Is I'm going to share a few links after this meeting for you to take a look at how other towns have done it. But what I wanted to do is at least spend some time here telling you at least what I've learned. And clearly based on the links Andrew sent me, he's done some reading too. So would welcome thoughts from him or anyone else. But really this capital planning policy, I think, is our way of actually formalizing some of the things we've said in meetings this year, and probably things that will dawn on us in the years to come in terms of how we, not only process of how we would like things done, which I think we've gotten 100% buy-in from departments, boards, and committees, but also, how we think about and prioritize these items, how we have the right level of conversation about funding them, I'll call it like the minimum level of funding that you would actually appropriate to capital in 1 year. I don't think we're going to have that problem for a long time, but it is something that if capital went way down in the future, you'd actually almost worry, are we maintaining and building our infrastructure appropriately? And then, just policies, much like the conversation Kathy and Andrew raised earlier about, should these be capital items in general? Should they roll from year to year? What's the review policy on items that did have the ability to roll year to year? And how are we kind of staying on top of these things? So it was fairly eye-opening to me. I kind of thought I knew where I wanted to go until I started reading more, and that's always dangerous too, because it's tough to bring it together. I will say most of these were written, it seemed, as part of bylaws in town, given that we're an ad hoc committee. You'll see, just so, especially for the newer members, they are written as if these committees are permanent in nature, not ad hoc in nature like we are. But I don't think that really necessarily gets in the way of what they were trying to achieve. But you'll see there were a lot of checks and balances along the way. It's not just capital calling the shots. It's really, how is that person collaborating with not only the town administrator, but all members of the finance team, right, to bring a collective view and check each other's views, right? So that it's not one or two people calling the shots, but it's also not one committee calling the shots, that there's, a wealth of experience between the paid staff of the town and the volunteers that are on the committee. So I will circulate those links and documents for everyone to peruse. I will also take a stab at drafting. This will be for our November, get my dates right, 9th meeting is where we will discuss this. And obviously, to the extent that BOS has any thoughts, based on our conversation on Tuesday night, we will certainly try to incorporate any of those, because they ultimately would be the one that accept and adopt the policy for the town.
Yeah, Jason, just to elaborate, actually, question probably for either Mark or Brian. When we were looking at the Nantucket capital planning, long-term capital planning policy, it was a part of an overall financial policy and procedure that did like procurement policy, budget transfer policy, levy limit, forecasting policy, free cash policy, all that kind of stuff. I couldn't find on the website, does Southborough have like kind of those financial policies and procedures written out or?
Yes, we do, and we can share those with you. When we were looking to get our increased bond rating, obviously that's something that we have to do, and that's all part of that process. So we can forward those things to the committee.
That'd be great.
I believe our current capital planning policy is 3 or 4 lines, Brian? Because it was,
Yeah, about
really,
that.
it was because we didn't have a committee. And it was really the finance team that had been handling it since the last one was disbanded.
That's obviously going to be dated.
Yeah. So I guess any other comments on that, or everyone agree with the general direction of that? I just really didn't feel comfortable rushing in adopting something prematurely. So we've talked about meeting schedule. So I guess I will just open it up. We do have members of the public here. See if anyone in the public has questions. I am seeing none. So I will see if anyone else has any other business you want to conduct tonight. All right.
I guess I could say that I did meet with the trail committee.
Okay.
They don't have any big projects. The Borough Trail that I was looking at that was most promising to at least utilize is really DCR control, Department of Recreation, Department of Conservation and Recreation controlled. So there's not much that can be done to it without an awful lot of dealing with them. And the trail committee's been unsuccessful in doing that, in converting it in any other way than its current form, which is basically just a hiking trail. I did encourage them to try and come up with some other projects that might be able to be put into effect if, the government does release an infrastructure package. So I think they're in discussions as to what the way they see a lot of their other projects moving forward. And I know they were discussing, at least later on in the meeting, a possible exercise trail around the golf course, which would be rather interesting too. So, but I encourage them to come up with capital items that can be bonded as opposed to budget items.
Okay, thanks for the update. And I will have members report going forward on each of the normal agendas as well. Anything else? All right, seeing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further conversation? All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook, you're on mute, Kathy.
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski, aye. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good